Does time influence accuracy in math problems? That was the question we sought to answer when we embarked on this experiment. Me, Toby, and Megan. So what we did was we had a quiz, a 10-question quiz of basic math problems, and what we wanted to see was how was the time that we gave allotted for each group of people, how would that affect the results. So we had 3 levels, 3 different groups for each, and for each group we had one group that had an unlimited amount of time to complete the quiz. The second group had 10 seconds to complete the quiz, and the third group had, for each question, that's true. And the last group had 4 seconds for each question to complete the quiz. And our hypothesis was that the group that had the least time given for the quiz will answer more questions correctly than the group that had the most time. Because we just kind of guessed that if you have less time, you'd focus more, you treat it seriously, and you just tend to zone in more on the task at hand.
So when we were going through this experiment, Toby and I thought that we were either going to be very right or very wrong, where it was either the smaller amount of time that you had would either force you to focus and sort of think clearly and efficiently through the different math problems, or the small amount of time would sort of make your brain a little bit frantic and freak out, and that you would perform actually worse. So just a similar experiment that I read about was very simply, got very deep into different sort of psychological terms that I'm not very familiar with, but it talked about math anxiety, which is most simply feeling of tension, apprehension, or fear that interferes with math performance, and how that affects your ability to do simple math problems. So they did a couple of experiments with people who identify as having very high math anxiety, and they did fine when it was just simple 2 + 2 = 4, but once the problems got a little bit more complex, they answered very quickly but very inaccurately, as just sort of an attempt to just sort of get it over with and move on from that. So instead of testing people with high math anxiety, we wanted to sort of try and replicate that effect by increasing the stress of the situation by decreasing the amount of time. So those are other similar experiments that we looked at.
So this is one of our terms, a random assignment. We chose from random students in Rosemary Hall that had, and we didn't have any sort of preferential treatment in putting somebody in the first group or the third group. And we made sure we had different grade levels, different genders, different races and age, just to make sure that our data was as representative of the population as much as possible.
And it was sort of pseudo-random because it's hard to get truly random groups of people, but we sent for the 3 different groups, we asked 20 people in each group, and within each 20 there were 5 freshmen, 5 sophomores, 5 juniors, and 5 seniors, and we tried to keep the balance even between males and females, but it's hard to get a truly random sample, but we tried to come as close as we could. So they were our subjects, the students that chose that we sent the email to.
And this was the response where we didn't track each individual performance. We instead looked at the total number of questions correct that was given for each quiz. And that was one of the sources of error for our quiz. With the way the software was set up, we couldn't exactly see how each specific individual did. We can see as a whole what the group did, but we were able to see how often people got question 1 correct and how often people got question 3 wrong out of the total number of times they took the quiz.
Yeah. So, because the difference is, we could see if 15 people answered question 1 for group 1 and 15 people got it right, that would be 100%. But one of the tricks is if for the group that had 4 seconds for each question, if 3 people took the question but 3 people got it right, that would also be marked as a 100% accuracy rate. But obviously it's very different because there were far fewer people taking the quiz, so it gets sort of tricky to compare the differences between more people answered a question than in another one. But we tried to keep it as close as we could by going for the So the different levels that we had, as Toby has already mentioned, our first group had an unlimited amount of time, because the idea there was that math, or the time wouldn't be a factor and that wouldn't cause stress at all. And the second group was sort of an intermediate with 10 seconds per question, and then the third group was sort of the highest stress situation with 4 seconds per question.
Since our main variable was the length of time given for each question for each group, we wanted to make sure we controlled as many variables as possible. So everybody has the same test. Each group was given the same test with the same number of questions and the same questions. And we administered the treatment all in the same way with the same email heading, and they each get the link. And then once they click the link, they complete the quiz. So we try to keep everything the same as much as possible.
And this was also between subjects design, because we didn't go back to the same subjects and ask them to complete it multiple times with different amounts of time, the unlimited, the 10 seconds, and the 4 seconds. We also thought partially because the more times you did a quiz, the better you would probably get at completing it, knowing the right answers. And you wouldn't want to do different quizzes because maybe different questions are different difficulty levels. So we just tried to ask as many people as we could for each of the different types. So there were different groups, but within each different group, they all had the same treatment.
So these are the results of the quiz we took. If you can't see, the blue line, the blue bar represents the group that had unlimited time. The red bar is the group that had 10 seconds, and the yellow one is or the orange, actually. And it depends. This last group over here is for 4 seconds, and the results were actually pretty surprising for us, even as we guessed that maybe the group that had the least amount of time would do the best. We had a lot of fluctuation here, and as you can see, in a lot of cases, the group that had the least amount of time did better on questions as a whole, because these are averages as a whole, than the group that had unlimited time. Like in question 2, question 3 was void because we had a problem with question 3 for the first group, but question 5 and question 8 and 10, that they did as a whole better. So that was pretty surprising to see on multiple occasions that even though they had 4 seconds, they were able to complete it faster and better.
That's also, this is, I think, a little bit overwhelming, but that's sort of for each individual question, but this is sort of the average accuracy for each level. So that's taking the accuracy for the 4 questions, for the 4 seconds over the 10 questions and averaging that at each of the different levels. But again, this is a little bit misleading because even though the 4 seconds had the highest accuracy rate and then 10 and then the unlimited amount of time, again, it's also a little bit misleading because there were fewer people that answered for the 4 seconds than there were for the unlimited amount of time. So that's definitely a source of error, and if we were to do it again, we would try and equalize that to make any difference there.
So, yep, so this is just the numerical results of how the groups did. And as you can see, group 3 did the best as a whole, given the sample size of people that answered all the questions. And group 1 got the lowest average score, average percent of questions right. So the conclusion is our hypothesis was supported by the data given, and we saw that time definitely had a factor on how well people did on the quiz. And the reason why we thought that this mattered is because if you apply it to if you apply it to life in general, as we see, usually when you have less time to complete an assignment, you usually want to be more focused to get it done. You want to make sure that you actually do complete the assignment in all cases. And this phrase, less time, means less grind. We felt that embodied the characteristic of just wanting to just get things done. So that's why we felt that did matter. Our data provide some significance in the real world. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, questions.